Jonathan. I'm the CEO of Quala, one of the sponsors of the Humans of CS community. And how great is this? It's really wonderful to see all of your faces coming in here. It's been one of my great joys working in Quala the last year and a half, is to really get to really understand the people that work in the CS space and how wonderful of a community these people are. Always so helpful to share ideas and to lift each other up. And this community, seeing grow in the last handful of months, has been a real pleasure of mine to see flourish, just because of the people that that CS tends to attract. So we have a great topic to talk about today that Jenna's going to tee up, talking about the intersection of customer success and sales. Super interesting, especially when it's the last day of the month and you're thinking about both your metrics from a sales perspective and a customer success metric, and how these teams work together or sometimes work opposingly at this intersection. So super interesting topic, and hence all the interest in people coming up to this event today. So stepping back, the purpose of Humans of Success, this community here, is the shared goals is to connect, support, and amplify the voices of those people in customer success. And we do this mostly through monthly community meetings like this, but there are other resources out there, which we'll link to after the session, but our online forum, leader interviews, YouTube, and other thought leadership that we're trying to foster as a community. This community is sponsored by my organization, Quala.io. It's a customer insight platform for success teams that's a powerful way to track, normalize, and combine the voice of the field with product usage. So we are real champions of the humans in the organization and their interaction with their customers. We merge that with data to come up with a holistic view of your customers and interact with them in healthy, organization growing, powerful ways. So all you guys are on mute. Feel free to use the chat channel to ask questions and be collaborative there. We'll be looking in there to pull questions into the conversation. And let me hand it over to Jenna, who's going to be emceeing this thing. Many of you have probably met her already. If not, she's always eager to reach out to the community to get feedback on the community and the Quala platform. So if you have not met her, she's awesome, and you will. And with that, let me hand it over to the incomparable Jenna to introduce our panel.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. And happy last day of the quarter for most of us. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for this discussion today. We have not met yet. I'm Jenna. I'm the head of growth at Quala. I'm usually behind the scenes for these community hours, so I'm really excited to be moderating this chat today, and it's so great to see you all here. As Jonathan said, the topic we're discussing today is one of my favorites, in part because I think there's always something to learn and improve upon when it comes to strengthening the partnership between sales and customer success. We're going to cover everything from common pitfalls to effective communication to incentivizing teams and more. I think you're really going to walk away with some tangible strategies and tips for increasing customer growth. I have some fantastic leaders who are going to help lead the discussion today. They're all leaders I admire and also happen to be really good friends. I officially wanted to bring them all together for what I anticipate to be a very lively debate. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. And then panelists, if you can share a little bit about your org and the makeup of your customers, that would be great. So first up, we have Chris Steele, who is the VP of Sales at Pliant. Fun fact about Chris is that he has an 18-month-old daughter and another one on the way. And next up, we have Courtney Camps, who's the Director of Enterprise Customer Success at WEP. She is also the dog mom to Dawson, who happens to be the cutest pup. Next up, we have Next up, we have James Newman, who's the VP of Sales at Glint, which is now part of LinkedIn. And don't let his charming accent fool you. He was formerly known as the Wolf when we worked together, and I know Courtney can attest to that. And lastly but not least, we have Honnoll, who is the co-founder and head of customer success at Quala. Fun fact about Sansi is that her name actually is from an old Western movie, which I did not know before this. So fun fact.
Mom. Careful when you're naming your kid.
Yeah.
What happened to them to me happened to them.
Awesome. So Chris, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your org and the makeup of your customers, and we'll run through.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks so much, Jenna and the Quala team for organizing this. Happy to be a part of it. And Sansi, using the word debate is a heated topic, that especially today. So conversation. But my name is Chris Steele. I'm the VP of Sales at a company called Pliant. We're in the infrastructure automation space, selling to the Fortune 2000. And we'll be speaking from some past experience as well as recently with a company called Onshape, which was in the computer-aided design space, and we sold that to PTC in November. So a lot of sales and CS structures and handoffs there, because it was a much more volume-based business. So today we're focused on the enterprise space, and we'll speak to that, but just appreciative of the invite and happy to chat with everybody on the panel and that's in the forum.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. Courtney, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, cool. Courtney Camps here. I am the Director of Enterprise Customer Success at Whoop. That's my Whoop right here. If you need more information, whoop.com. But I literally just started last Monday, so I am not a Whoop expert yet. I've been on the app and getting to my team and everything like that. So a lot of my experience I'll probably be drawing from my most recent position, which I was the Director of Enterprise Customer Success at Drift. And prior to that, I headed up the awesome customer success team at Evertrue, where I was for almost 8 years and was the 5th employee of that company. And prior to that, did a bunch of other things, including being a dorm parent at a boarding school, which is the craziest job in the world and also a great preparation for customer success. So that's my little bio.
I'll come back to that one later.
Yeah, I'm happy to share boarding school tips on that, but it really does prepare you for CS.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And James?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenna, and thank you for the opportunity. So yes, my name is James Newman. I'm one of the regional vice presidents of sales on the Glint team. At Glint, our mission in life is to help people be happier and more successful at work, and we do that through helping companies measure, track, and drive employee engagement. And then we essentially turn continuous employee listening programs into actionable, intelligent development opportunities for business leaders, so on and so forth. We were acquired by LinkedIn about 2 years ago, and it's been a really, really exciting journey as you think about LinkedIn more broadly and how they sort of now fit very much even more broadly into the talent space in terms of plan, hire, develop, and now engage. And yeah, I have a shared history with the wonderful Courtney Camps, and of course you, Jenna, from our time at Evertrue together. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Exciting discussion.
Of course. Thank you so much. And lastly, but not least, Sansi.
Cool. Yeah, I'll keep it short. So Koala, we're a single workspace for customer-facing teams, and our aim is to deliver a powerful way to combine qualitative and quantitative data from your people, from your products, and more. And our customer success team right now is quite small. There is two of us. There are two of us, and then previously, I ran a company called Promobox, and we had about 15 on our customer success team. So I understand what it's like to build a team and then grow it to 4 mid-sized companies. And mid-sized companies are typically who we work with at Koala, those of us that have pretty strong relationships with our customers and are looking to enhance those relationships and understanding in order to drive retention and growth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I have a feeling this is definitely going to be a heated discussion. So let's dive right in. So to start at the top, I think it's important that we actually define the goals of CS and sales, knowing that it might look slightly different from org to org, but at the least we can point to some of the high level outcomes that each group is trying to achieve. So I'll start with you, Sansi. If you can share maybe what are the high level goals of sales and separately CS?
Yeah, I think so many answers to these questions could be, it depends, but my experience has mostly been that sales is razor focused on new business for earlier teams. As you get into mid-stage teams, you can see the emergence of an account team that then handles renewals. And that traditionally customer success, there tend to be 2 different camps. One camp is that we're responsible for upsell, cross-sell, and renewal. We have a number that we're tracking towards. We own that number. And then there's another camp where they're mostly focused on adoption and engagement and marrying the sort of values that the customer has with the values that the business has in order to make sure everyone's successful and growing. So Koala, our customer success team is really focused on that adoption and engagement piece. At Probox, we actually had a core number that we tracked towards. So there are positives and minuses, I think, to both. but it's very specific to the type of organization that you are building, and the goals that you're trending towards.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think part of the reason why this is a hot topic is because it can change from org to org, and that the goals may not align in every single instance. So I think it's really important that we chat about it. So moving into that topic, what are some of the pitfalls that do throw customer success and sales into misalignment? James, I'll throw this one to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. I think, oftentimes, that disconnect can often happen in terms of what may be perceived as misset expectations during the sales process and not setting a customer up for long-term success. So often, what can happen in the wrong situation is by literally day one of that customer journey. So once they sign their contract, they're introduced to their CS representative. They suddenly sort of get into a dialogue and realize that they thought they were getting X and really we can only deliver Y. And all of a sudden, you're creating a bit of a downstream issue, obviously for the CS person. It creates a little bit of mistrust then for the salesperson or the sales org. And so I think that can often be kind of one of the sort of principal rubs that I've seen. And the reason for that can be, a number of different things, unintentional, or it can be candidly things like a bad sales culture. So where the focus is all about, hey, win at any cost, all business is good business. It doesn't matter. Just get the win. That I think is fundamentally a bad thing. I think, poorly trained sales people that really don't understand the product or service, and do good discovery to make sure there's really strong customer alignment. And we're going to bring in good business, healthy customers, happy customers. And sometimes, salespeople just, there's a misunderstanding or something and we get that wrong. But if we can fix those first couple of things and we can build a sense of trust between those two teams, then I think that's going to sort of have obviously a more positive downstream impact.
Just to add on to that too, I think, sorry, Jenna, I was just going to add that, I think another thing that can get folks tripped up too is just kind of the definition of customer success versus support. And I think that there sometimes can be misalignment there too on, the customer success person, just do anything you possibly can to make the customer happy. And there is an element of that 100% for sure, but there's also kind of an element too of wanting to be much more strategic consultants that are moving the customer forward to be able to make that renewal or the expansion opportunity easier. And that doesn't necessarily always mean fixing every single break fix issue that comes along the way. And I think a really important piece that needs to happen is really defining the customer success manager's role and where those lines live. And of course they'll be blurry at certain points in time, but I think that that's something that there could be mis-expectations sometimes for sales. They're just we'll do anything to make them happy to keep them in the house. And that's not necessarily always the right move either.
Yeah. And not to continue to piggyback on the same topic, but I think culture is a huge thing early on in the development of a company, right? For the founders out there, co-founders out there, your first hires in sales and customer success are going to drive the long-term behavior of what that relationship looks like. So if you're breeding a culture of telling the sales team, hey, we're going to do good deals, you're rewarded on retention numbers, there are clawbacks for signing up churn risks, those are the core tenets that need to be put in place early on at a company, I feel. And I draw back on my Onshape experience, and we had executive leadership from the top down who was in full support of CS, sales, and marketing all being in alignment. And that promoted and really led way to doing good business that was not going to be a churn risk. So I think culture early on is a huge thing when considering CS and sales alignment. It can be a pitfall if you make the wrong hire, so don't mess it up.
Yeah,
Chris,
absolutely.
I'm actually reminded, so a quick shout out for a really good podcast if you're in the sales and SaaS community. So I listened to a podcast called SaaStr, SAASTR. It's really good. So I was on my run this morning and I was listening to one that was the CEO of ZoomInfo. He was talking about the 10 biggest mistakes he's made growing the business to eventually IPO. And it was very timely because one of the things he had in his sort of top 10 was not investing early enough in CS. It was all about sales. All the investment went straight to sales, just get new business in the door without really making sure the foundation was there to support it and building a culture around that, somewhat to Chris's point. So that early investment in CS as well as sales is just critical, because once you've gone through that time, energy, and effort of getting them in the door, how do we make sure that we deliver on that promise and create a really rich experience, and obviously improve renewals, upsells, and so on and so forth. So I thought it was really timely. My only other quick build was, on that was one of the things I found really helpful when Courtney and I partnered together at Evertree, where I was leading the sales organization and Courtney was leading the customer success organization, was we were aligned at the senior level. So we very much sort of had mutual respect for our collective objectives and making sure that they were aligned. So whenever we used to meet, we used to do things like pipeline reviews. So I would share with Courtney, here's where the pipeline's tracking. Here are some of the accounts that we're working on. I would bubble up, questions or maybe red flags and say, hey, look, I think we've got a really great customer. They're really going to be a fantastic fit. I've got some questions around this. Can you help us? Just again, making sure that, are we bringing in good business? And equally giving Courtney a heads up in terms of other areas where we may need to, have additional service and support through that journey. So I think that alignment culturally at the top was important too.
Yeah, there are a few chats. I think it's just a really good topic. This like when it all costs, James, you mentioned this is a mentality that a lot of teams have. If we have many people, I don't know, you can raise your hand or clap, that are in maybe early stage, then this when it all costs can be something that's pretty pervasive, because as we know, for early stage startups, it is, a lot of cases all about traction. And traction a lot is mostly focused on new business. I think how we can navigate that better moving forward, or how I've seen it done well, is even if you have a sales team that is gritty, really focused, all about those numbers and really wanting to fuel that company growth, the honest conversation that can happen between sales and customer success on, okay, we're closing this business. Is it actually ICP? And what are the realistic expectations of success and lasting relationships with this business? Because customer success folk will do just like sales teams, right? We're going to do whatever we can to try to make success happen and for the customer to realize the value that they're looking for. But if we know, CS, in the beginning, what the realistic expectations are, how possible is it for us to achieve X, Y, and Z levels of success with this customer, given the fact that they match or don't match ICP, just having that conversation gives us all the ability to exhale and say, okay, what's realistic come year 1, year 2, year 3 of our relationship with this customer, and how much success will we actually see? I get it. Sales, you want to bring in new business. We want that to happen too, because we want to work with customers. So what does that conversation look like, so we're all honest with each other?
Yeah. And I think it could be, making sure that salespeople understand that it's really short-sighted just to look at that short-term win. Because at the end of the day, if we bring in bad business, or a customer that deep down in our heart, we know there's just misalignment, or our product's not going to deliver on expectations, they're just ultimately going to be unhappy. And then that's going to have, in a world where reputations can be won or lost in the blink of an eye, right, through the web, that's naturally going to sort of hurt things like references, referrals, your brand, equity in the marketplace. And that's going to make your sales job that much harder, because all of your buyers are communicating. They're in communities and networks. They're talking about what's working well, what's not working. And so making sure that you're, again, bringing in good business and they're going to be happy and evangelize for you downstream is super important, obviously.
And Jane, piggyback off of that, I think there are a few different dynamics, and I think it varies by what stage of a company's evolution you're in. With OpenView is consistently talking about product-led growth. And so today, I think with the evolution of SaaS and kind of the try it before you buy it type model, many times, like a sales team knows if there's alignment, if the value prop is sound, and should be presenting to CS what potential risks are with signing up a new customer and getting buy-in early on in the process. So I think, Santi, to your point, product market fit, ICP, that has to be an early engagement, bringing CS in if it is not within that criteria that's been defined by the company. And I think just the amount of access that users or folks that we're selling to have to our technology and to past technologies that I've represented, they're so much more well-informed today. So it's not something where you can really get away with selling shelfware anymore. It's not 1995 where you're selling an Oracle database. People have access to information and have made their mind up pretty well into the buying process before they ever even engage with sales. So I think it's our obligation to guide a buyer through the buyer's journey, if you will, and set them up for success and bring in CS at the opportune time to make sure that their experience is a great one and you're not signing up a churn risk.
Absolutely. There's so many good points in here, so meaty. We talked about, I think just kind of recapping some of these pitfalls and so many good points in here, from day one, James, not setting customers up for success, making sure that you're really clearly defining roles early on between sales and CS and even support if it falls under that. The culture sounds like it's really important to shape from day one to make sure that it isn't the attitude of let's just get that win. Building trust, extremely important, not just, among the teams, but from at the top at senior leadership. And then lastly, defining that ICP, setting expectations on what that looks like, what success looks like at each stage, and particularly, at year one when that, renewal is up. So really awesome points there. And I think there's, it's a good segue into, talking about handoff. And Chris, I think you kind of led that, last piece there of what, how have teams worked together in the past to improve that process? I think, there's this idea that the handoff is a one and done, and that, it's, you have that meeting and now it's on to the CS team to own that relationship, but is it an ongoing process? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But, broadly speaking, how have your teams worked together? What are the attributes of a successful handoff? I think, I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Chris, if you're able to chat about it.
Yeah, for sure. And so speaking from the Onshape experience, again, we had a freemium model with hundreds of thousands of free users. So it was really a conversion business, right? Where there's a lot of volume and transaction. And so early on, we started very basic, right? Like said, hey, here's a sheet that we're going to hand over to the CS team based upon the information that we gathered through the sales process. And we got to a point where like salespeople, me being one, are very programmed to say like, on to the next deal. Let's move on. Let's keep moving through. Let's close the quarter strong. But what we did is we ended up getting to a place where we hard coded into every opportunity in Salesforce what the growth potential was, what the use cases were, what the pitfall potentially were, and really had a well-documented and well-structured handoff plan to CS. And part of that motion also was for any customer who was purchasing more than 5 seats, like CS came on to the closing call to start creating the onboarding plan for that customer. So we made it simple, stupid, made sure we gathered a lot of information throughout the sales process, which was then captured in salesforce.com. This way, there was radical transparency with CS as they were getting onto the first call and throughout the first 3 months, which I think are crucial in dictating a customer success long-term. So that was what we did at Onshape from a more volume commercial side of things. I also worked to structure our enterprise go-to-market at Onshape, and now we're focused entirely on large enterprise deals here at Pliant. And it's a different motion, right? Because a lot of times when you're going out and you're whale hunting at times, looking for these larger deals in the Fortune 2000 space, you need to bring CS in early. You need to bring engineering in early, because are we going to have every single piece of functionality that a Verizon Wireless needs? Maybe, maybe not. So getting clear communication, getting clear buy-in from leadership across the board, from engineering to CS to support, is really, really important when you're talking about an enterprise go-to-market function. And that creates great alignment, because now when you are, when the transaction happens, CS is fully aware of like nice to haves, needs to get to production, and would be really cool if you had that feature at some point in the future, because it helps them prioritize and can really put the customer in the best position to be successful and give us the greatest greatest opportunity for renewal.
The thing for me that I've been really focused on and thinking a lot about is the idea of like kind of like points of contact, like, and that's a huge part of the handoff too, because the person that sales is maybe working with is not necessarily the person who's going to be implementing it or be the project manager, but they might still be the person who needs to sign the contract the next year. And we need to ultimately make sure that they're seeing return on investment. So I think that there's also a really important element of really like understanding the personas and mapping that out very early on in the relationship, and also recognizing that that's probably going to change 50 times over the course of the relationship with the customer too. And so having checks and balances to be able to make sure that every single account has those people on it, and that if there is someone who's leaving, that you're very quickly finding out who their replacement is. And some of that can start like very early on in the beginning of the sales process, and then has to be kind of an evolution with the CS team kicking that off. And that like handoff is also something too that I think sales can continue to be involved in. Like if the CS person is getting ghosted, can the sales rep go back in to their original buyer, and making sure that you have kind of that communication loop between the two teams around just the people who we need to work with can be a really important place to focus on.
That's a great point, Kat. So I think it's really important, I think, to impart upon our sales folks of trying to make sure that we're multi-threaded in an account going in, to your point, Courtney, because I think oftentimes you're right. It's like, oh yeah, here was the procurement person I was dealing with. They're our main point of contact, and they're just not. The other key role that I think we try to make sure is part of that handoff process is there's an executive sponsor, because oftentimes, we've seen that, if we don't have that relationship at that executive sponsor level, it makes both handling any downstream issues and certainly a renewal kind of really challenging. So making sure when the handoff happens, CS has a very clear understanding of who's the day-to-day contact, who's the ultimate business process owner and the executive sponsor for this, and making sure that we can have multiple sort of contact points is I think critical to the ongoing relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
When speaking of relationships, I think too, sometimes with our handoffs, we can be very clinical. We mention the person and their role and what they want to achieve with the platform and what their tech stack looks like currently maybe, and we have sort of this checklist that we go down. And sometimes we miss some of the important qualitative components of where this person is in their career and what they're personally hoping to achieve, what their family life looks like, and how you met, what really got them excited about this opportunity, anything that they share around their own personal mission and vision. These are fun tidbits, their birthday, like just things that in the sales process, you're so close to these people and you learn so much. And that information is so helpful when it's passed along to the customer success team, because it's just a more rich data source that we can then helps us feel, again, more connected, and I feel like makes us more powerful advocates for the customer.
That's a great point. Find that connection on a really personal level. Yeah, great point. Love it.
And Sansi, I love that point. And I think one thing that we've missed from this part of the discussion, particularly at this important handoffs phase, is we're thinking about it from our point of view, as the vendor, the company, but how can we make it more about the customer and from their point of view? Sansi, I don't know if you want to add on to just, how you've done that in the past and really make it customer centric and not company centric. It's easy to get lost in that.
Yeah. And we have obviously customers on this call, so I'm curious to hear what they think. So from my perspective, I've found it really powerful to continuously document the customer experience and the customer journey. The experience is really, again, from beginning to end. You first meet them all the way through to renewal, and the journey is really, once they start on their platform. But when I do that, I like to think about the inflection points of how are we helping them achieve the goals that they've stated, but how are they feeling at these different points in the process? So with onboarding, we want them to be excited, think about the possibilities, be focused on innovation. We don't want them to feel tied down and like, oh my gosh, I have 50 things to do and this is the 51st thing, and stressed out. So I find it really powerful to stay connected to and constantly be thinking about the journey and the experience, and chatting with customers about what that looks like for them to think about, really great areas of improvement. The other way that, I mean, this is so simple. You guys are probably going to throw tomatoes at me, but like, use your own product, like some of us, as we, grow in the organization, we become disconnected on what it's like to first start using our product. So uninstall the product, create a new login, delete your like do whatever you need to do to start to begin again, start at the starting point. And how does it make you feel? Is it confusing? Do you have questions? And then now you're the customer and you can understand as well. So your customer doesn't have to be a proxy. You can actually do that yourself in some cases.
Yeah, I love that. Great point. I guess Courtney, to take it to you, I know you might have some strong opinions on this topic, but once CS has done all that work, Sanci's talking about building those relationships, understanding it from their perspective. What do you think that the role should be for sales, as managing the ongoing customer relationship? At what point should they be engaging? How often should they be touching to customers? From your perspective, how do you envision that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on there are different customer success organizations. They're structured differently. So there are some that the CS team owns the renewal, maybe even owns an expansion opportunity. There are some that they're completely uninvolved in that. They're really just kind of focused on customer health. Either way, even with both of those models, it really has to be collaborative. I think that it really it takes a village to be able to do these things. And so I think, you want the customer to feel like they have a great kind of support system around them, and that there's a lot of people there that are willing to be able to stick their necks out for them or advocate for a feature or all these different things. So I think a little bit of that, my answer depends on just how you're structured and who's basically on the hook at the end of the day for the renewal. At the end of the day, we're all on the hook for the renewal, but if there are kind of certain checks and balances that need to be performed by a particular team member, I think kind of baking that into the programming. So at my last position, we rolled out a whole strategic business review process. And so quarterly we were going to the customer, and there were particular SBRs that we needed the sales team person there because it was kind of starting the renewal conversation. So it's 6 months prior, 3 months prior, those are ones that it really kind of was important for both the CSM to have their talk track, but then also the account manager to have their talk track too, and how they were going to kind of handle going into that renewal conversation. And there's different inflection points too, that you can kind of have these check-in points and say, all right, is the account going green or is it going red? And which direction are we going in? And if it's good, maybe that puts more onus on the CSM to keep going there. If it's bad, maybe there's some triage things that need to happen. We need to go back to executives. We need to work with the support team and make sure that those bugs are fixed or whatever the issues are. So I guess my answer is a little bit confusing, but it a little bit depends on who's going to be on the hook for the renewal at the end of the day. And then how can we build in kind of that programming that's going to make the most sense of who's going to lead particular parts of the conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces that you mentioned is that it really depends on, you have to be flexible, right? You can't, the answer is it depends, and you can't have hard and fast rules every single call the salesperson needs to be on, or they need to reach out for these things, and that it really needs to be a fluid process where, depending on the relationship, depending when things come up, that sales, that's where the trust and the relationship has to be there between sales and CS to make sure that they feel comfortable, moving back and forth in that. I think I saw a question pop up about, should salespeople attend QBRs? That's a really interesting one, and curious to get your thoughts on that.
There's plenty of times too, I don't want them there, leave. So, and I mean, all the love in the world to my sales friends, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And the customer knows, they're smart. They know what this person, that they sold them initially, or that they're supposed to be there to upgrade them, or whatever the case they are. So I think that's why it's really defining out even very early in the customer's journey to tell them, hey, we're going to have 2 or 4 or whatever the number is QBRs over the course of our year together. James is going to be showing up to these ones. So if you have any questions about contracts or whatever, that's a great time to talk to him about that. I'm going to be hosting these ones that are going to be really focused on health and value. You can even I like being just upfront with the customer ahead, so they know what's coming. On this date, we're going to have a renewal conversation. If you want to have it sooner, I'm happy to do that. If you want to have it later, we probably can't make that happen, but that's our drop dead day to have the renewal conversation. And if I tell you that 9 months in advance, it shouldn't be a surprise when I call you to book the renewal call. So I think that, I think it's kind of figuring out what's the right pattern of showing value for the customers, and then making a call of all right, who can lead this one, or who's going to be the person there. But I don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. So you really have to be thoughtful about where that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And I think that role definition is key to making sure, there's no treading on toes and figuring out, when is the right time. But I think it's important for customers to understand too that, you're not the kind of sales organization that's going to sell something and then run for the hills, but you are going to be accountable on an ongoing basis. So I think sometimes even if you're not set up where the salesperson continues to be responsible for the upselling of that account, I still think it's helpful for that salesperson to be there at that kind of initial introduction meeting, ensure there's a smooth handoff, and maybe at the kind of the 90-day check-in or whatever it is to again show ongoing interest and accountability, and continuing to maintain that relationship without treading on the toes of CS. Because again, that customer will be your best, sales asset in the future if they become a real advocate of your product or service, obviously. So maintaining that relationship while also being sort of conscious that you're not creating more debris for CS to deal with is important.
Yeah, and I think, and I've had members of my team in the past who have done it, and it's a borderline fireable offense, but customer success owns that relationship, right? And so over communicating with CS to get an understanding of the health of an account is so important before any outreach from a sales member or somebody on our sales team. So I think over communication is big because, I mean, let's face it, folks get quota breath at the end of a quarter, and you call into an account who is having some technical issue with the product or isn't as happy as you thought they were when they were going through the sales process, and you call them for an expansion at the end of a quarter, and that just makes everybody in the organization look poorly. So I think just over communicating, creating a culture where it's like CS owns this relationship. CS is going to be the team who makes them successful and is rewarded for retention. Sales, you can upsell, but you're not going into be a cowboy and try and upsell without the green light from CS.
Yeah, and I think there are always accounts that will surprise you and upgrade when you never thought that they were going to, or renew when you didn't think that. But I think it's also really important to like give the sales team the right signals. So if you have a particular account that's downloading and watching every single webinar you have and every single white paper and whatever, like they should probably know about that. Like that's kind of a lead that you can be kind of working. And so I think it's like, it's that information sharing that's like rooted in data as well too. Like not just like feelings of like, oh, I don't feel like this account loves us. It's like, no, they don't love us because they've sent 100 support tickets and they, had a bad NPS survey and they never open our emails. Like that's a data rooted decision there. And I think sales teams tend to respond to that better when you actually can show them like, this is why this isn't a good account to go into, but this is a great account to go into and you haven't talked to them in a while. Go forth.
Right.
Yeah, I love the, radical transparency and communication in this process. I think, sometimes you can get tripped up on, okay, we know we need to communicate, but that often, for one reason or another, we're not successful in actually sharing those insights. What are some of, either Chris or Courtney, whoever wants to jump in, like, what are some of the actual ways that you've had successful communication? Is it, having weekly calls with, the sales or CS person on that account, or what are some of the ways that you actually drive clear communication that has actually worked?
Weekly calls would be nice. I think, and it's such a routine answer, but it's just data hygiene. Like what is in the CRM and living and dying by that. Making sure that there's alignment in the CRM. So both CS and sales are on the same page, and it doesn't require what could be a 5-minute lookup in Salesforce or HubSpot. It doesn't require a 30-minute or an hour Zoom each week. So that's kind of what I preach. Good data in, good data out. And that's how I typically handle that. Courtney, I don't know if you feel differently, but.
Yeah, I mean, I am a Salesforce junkie. And I think that's like the best source of truth for everything. But I also do think that there is an element of sitting down and being able to do an account crawl, kind of like what James was mentioning that he and I used to do all the time. Like there is that human to human interaction that can be really beneficial, but everyone's busy. So sitting and doing that, on a weekly basis is probably pretty unrealistic. I think it also depends on like how many sales reps you have to work with. So there are some CS teams that they just work with these, 1 or 2 sales reps. And so in that kind of way, you have more of the ability to really get to know each other. There are some organizations that you're working with every single sales rep, and that becomes really overwhelming. So I think building in at least kind of 2 quarterly checkpoints. So maybe there's one in the beginning of the quarter where you're kind of thinking about like where you're going, and then one more, maybe more towards the end of where you need to go is really important. And I think it's prepping for those QBRs. If you are going to do that collaboratively, if you are going to have the salesperson on it, making sure that you've done kind of a prep meeting together, that you've defined those roles and responsibilities. And even that can be really beneficial. I think it's surprising sometimes, like how many times we just roll into calls and we don't really prep for it, even with the other people, even on your team. And I think that that's really essential, especially when you're getting in front of big customers and it gets more high stakes.
I would love to comment on that. I think it's such an important thing to say. I've also heard of this concept. This is not my concept. I don't know where I got it from, but it's the idea of roles and souls. So, you know, again, looking at our QBRs or our customer checkpoints, we can do that really clinically. And there's so many important things around roles and responsibilities and value and, you know, how you want to structure those. I feel like it's important from a soul perspective. There could be a account manager or a salesperson that the customer really connects with and they have a positive relationship, and their role is to be an internal champion and sort of like to pump up the meeting and get people excited. For whatever reason, they are that person. So I would say, you know, be aware, if you're in customer success, be aware of your lieutenants that can be really positive forces for those strategic connects. Especially if you're going to be bringing in, you know, your buyer or someone where that's a really impactful meeting and there's a lot to accomplish. And then with the data piece, so important, like you want one source of truth where all teams can collaborate, understand what's happening with the customer. Don't miss that important information that's like, you know, humans are messy people. We're not all controlled by hard data. So, you know, what are those more finessing, again, qualitative things where it's important for you to understand that, you know, customer is actually, yes, this is the value they're seeing, but they're really gunning for a promotion over the next 12 months. Like, how do we help them get there as a way that we can do that as a partner or a vendor? So that was really verbose. I apologize. But I think the finessing and the roles and souls I think about all the time.
I love that. Roles and souls. I'm definitely adopting that. I love it. I guess if we're talking about bringing all these people in, since you're talking about other internal champions, there's a good question that came up. I think it was from Tracy at Alice. Is there a concern on cost of acquisition for looping in the CS person or CS pre-sale? I think it's a really interesting question, and that do customers pay for onboarding and professional services? I think it's a fantastic question. And as you bring on more people, it's important to think about, you know, is there a cost to acquisition for that? I don't know who wants to jump in on that. Courtney, Chris, James, anyone?
Yeah, no, I think it's super valuable. I think that how I've been thinking about it a little bit more and less so in my exact current position, but you want to save the CS team, you know, they should be working with customers who are paying, you know, for that service. And that's something that the sales team can kind of use as a carrot to sign the contract so that we can work with you on this side. So I think it's really important to also like really empower and power up your directors or your managers or the people who are even that step above, that they could roll into a sales call and be able to help pitch like what's going to happen, but they're not necessarily taking the CSM or the implementation person or whoever away from their day-to-day job, who's focusing on people that are paying them currently. So I think there's always going to be certain special circumstances, and that's fine. But maybe I've been in my past kind of thinking more about like, okay, how can we get maybe more of those higher level people that can speak to some of these things, but aren't necessarily going to take away from like what they need to do in their day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to chat about a topic that I think is important. We've been hitting a little bit on how CS, you know, plays an important role when it comes to expansions and upsells and renewals, but it's not always, you know, a part that they're compensated on. And knowing that, you know, sales can be a very individual sport. When we're talking about comp plans, do we incentivize CS around expansion? Is that something that you guys are for, or how do you turn that experience into more of like a team sport? You know, we're all charging towards the same outcomes and goals, and we're actually being compensated for the same things. I guess, you know, Sonciary, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think incentives can be very powerful. You know, some of the thoughts are customer success teams are not really revenue focused, or, you know, they care less about money and they're really focused on keeping people happy and building relationships. And maybe there's a portion of that that's true, but we all love to be, you know, compensated for the work that we do. And if it's driving growth within the organization, whether it's a, you know, a spiff or an incentive or a, you know, some sort of bonus, it can be a really powerful motivator in a way to recognize customer success within the broader organization as far as its role in driving revenue. So I've done them before. I think they're very powerful. And actually it has created a better relationship between customer success and sales, because it's very clear the, you know, combined goals or the overall growth that we're both trending towards. And we know the different levers that we have to contribute to that success. So it's been powerful for me. It's been based on net revenue retention too. So it's, yes, there's a incentive for expansion and there's, you know, docked for churn, but you can pull additional revenue from whatever customer, you know, is most closely to potentially expanding. And I love, I'll stop after this. I love the way CS approaches a lot of these opportunities, because it is so they're so empathetic in their approach and so focused on customer first. Is this going to be good for the customer? Are they going to love it? Are they going to feel good? Is it going to make them look good? Okay, great. That means it's going to make me look good. How do we get there together?
Yeah, I think it's so important to think about what is going to motivate each side of the coin. You know, sales is often, you know, typically usually focused on incentives on comp, and like you're saying, CS is often focused on how can we drive the best results for the customer and value for the customer. But if we're all charging towards that same outcome and we all get a piece of that pie, I think that truly creates, like you said, better relationships between the two. James, I'm curious to hear from a sales perspective, you know, are you only focused on new business, or do you also, you know, get compensated on expansions and renewals? And also, how does churn potentially impact comp at all?
Yeah, great question. Gosh, there's so many, I guess, sort of thoughts or experiences I've had in you know, in those different modalities. So to answer your question directly, so today our team has actually changed fairly recently. So we're just focused on net new business, net new revenue is really where we're focused. But that was a fairly recent change. So up until the transition of our new fiscal, which was in June, July, our salespeople actually owned the upsell opportunity for the first year of the relationship. So obviously how that interaction would happen with CS is obviously the CS person would be, which bleeds into another thought I had around, you know, the CS person is obviously the closest to the customer, they're closest to the issues, they're closest to the opportunity to identify need and opportunity, obviously. And they've also got to live on an ongoing basis with that relationship. So they're always going to give advice and potential sort of upsells with great integrity, because they want to make sure that the customer's obviously going to be happy on an ongoing basis. You know, what we found is candidly is that oftentimes, you know, the CS person, by the time they'd identified an opportunity for an upsell, to be honest, most of the selling to some degree was kind of done, right? And so they would then flip it to the salesperson. The salesperson would pick it up. They'd have generally at that point a commercial conversation. You know, the upsell would happen and they'd go through. That's sometimes, I'm not dismissing, you know, some of the work would happen, but you know, that would be oftentimes what would happen. And you know, because they're also conflicted, because they're trying to bring in net new revenue, that was primarily the focus. So we were probably you know, missing opportunity in our installed base to obviously to grow it. So anyway, we flipped that, and we have we call them relationship management team, who's primarily responsible from day one for upselling that existing that customer, the renewal, and I'm definitely a proponent that the renewal isn't a month before the contract's up for renewal. It's day one. The renewal starts day one, and so I think when you get an opportunity to be introduced at that early stage, the CS person has an opportunity to start building that relationship and trust and understanding. They then obviously can work on the upsells, and then it makes that renewal conversation, I think, that much greater. Yeah. It certainly, I mean, candidly, it created some heartburn for our sales organization, because we had a great year in terms of, you know, expanding our customers, and it felt like that was sort of, you know, going away. But I think at a business level, that kind of made, you know, made the most sense. My only other, you know, quick build, I guess, on that is you know, reflecting on you know, before my current environment, you know, when I was first leading a sales and CS organization, I came in with two incorrect assumptions in terms of whether CS should own that upsell or not. And the first was, I was worried that the CS relationship would be tainted by having a CS person incentivized on growing that account. You know, I didn't want their advice influence relationship to be based on that CS person, you know, making money and, you know, so on and so forth. I wanted to be somewhat impartial, make sure everyone's, you know, appropriately compensated, etc. obviously. But And then secondly, that maybe CS people aren't naturally sort of able to have a strong commercial conversations and contract negotiations that salespeople do all the time. I quickly found out that that wasn't true, and so I'm not saying that everyone sort of naturally falls into that bucket straight away, but I think most good CSMs are just really excited about partnering with clients, really excited about driving value out of the existing product set, and really excited and really good at identifying unmet need and the solution that will fill that from within the business. And some of the other kind of components can be taught. So I think we ended up enabling and empowering our CS org to Courtney's organization to be able to upsell and manage renewals all at the same time.
Yeah, I think the best thing that CSMs can do is really not only be a product expert for like the day-to-day of like being able to use the product, like that's really important, but I think it's also being a product expert that's really tied into what are the feature sets that are coming? How are they going to have an impact on this customer? How can they be in front of the customer, educating them with the latest and greatest, article that we just put out, or webinar that we're doing, or research that's coming out, or whatever the thing is. And so being able to be proactively like one step ahead to be able to make sure that the customer knows, if they haven't been loving the navigation or whatever, oh, well, there's actually an update coming and we'd love your feedback on it. And we'd love to get you into the early beta testing group. Like that type of stuff is the type of thing that actually is planting seeds for an expansion or for even just a flat renewal. Because you're kind of giving them that early access. You're making sure that they know that they're getting in on something that not everyone knows. And so I think that's an amazing way for CSMs to be able to support renewal and expansion opportunities without necessarily being salesy. They're just getting ahead of that customer education piece, and they're always kind of driving that. And that's going to naturally also bring up opportunities, rather than just like sitting back and waiting for the customer to email you. If you just sit back and wait for them to email you, they're probably never going to email you. So it's being in their inbox, in their office when we're back in the office, like, and giving them those nuggets before they even ask for them.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's like, what can you do to help sales without them, asking for it, but really that drives the upsells and growth when you're able to be that point person every day, driving them through the journey of what do you know, because you're the expert, exactly what they're looking for, what they'll appreciate, and that'll only help sales. So I'm curious on the flip side, like what maybe has sales done for CS that they've really appreciated? I don't know who wants to take that. Maybe Sansa, if you want to dive in.
Yeah, I think what I've really learned from some of the amazing sales leaders I've had the privilege to work with is to be bold. Maybe that's a little different from really the question that you're asking, but for me specifically, it's taken time to realize or understand my different flavor for how I like to sell, essentially. And, I was really appreciative of learning from other people that helped teach me how to be bold, how to talk about value, how to position that in a way that made sense to the person that was sitting across the table, and to always lead with that give first mentality. I think is something we talk about a lot. For me, give first always puts me in a place where I feel like I'm depositing good things into the bank so I can make withdrawals when it's appropriate. That was another concept I learned from some pretty amazing sales leaders I've worked with. So yeah, I think for me, it was the ability to sort of be bold and declare value that I thought that I could bring to the table, or that I thought our technology could bring to the table. And, worst thing that happens is they sort of pass or like, me, another time, and that's okay too. It gives you an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, there's so much to learn from each other. And I think that's like one of the key themes that I'm taking away from this session, is that each has such a unique value to add to the relationship and in different ways. And so I think we can learn on what each other does well and how we both can drive towards that success together. I mean, it's so powerful. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to add on to that. What maybe have you seen or done that, has either CS has really appreciated or vice versa?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as far as like whatever you can do from a sales organization perspective to make sure that both customer success and marketing are aligned with you, whether that's in the form of like inviting them to sales trainings that you might be hosting, just really making sure that everybody feels that they're one team is a critical step towards everybody being successful, right? I don't have one example to say like, hey, this is something that we did and it absolutely transformed our relationship with customer success. I think it's open communication, creating a culture where you are partnering with those three departments, because I think all three of those departments are critical in driving revenue and retaining revenue. And so just making sure that everybody feels that partnership and there's open lines of communication is the biggest thing you can do from a sales to CS relationship, from my perspective.
Just mentioned sales training. I do think that that's also really important too. And we did that at Evertrue. That was just like every single sales training we did or whatever. Also, the CSM team was doing it with them too. And I think that's really, really important to teach those skills, because there are going to be situations where a customer is asking a CSM about pricing or this, that, and the other thing. And we need to make sure that they have the same, they might not be those commercial experts to be able to do that, but they need to be able to like stick up for themselves or for their company or whatever, and make sure that they've got some of that, just courage or skill to be able to say, no, we can't do that, or we can do this, without necessarily having to bring someone else onto the call.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Training is a huge piece, and looping them in to make sure that everyone is a part of that and it's not, separate is really valuable. I think we're coming up on time, which makes me so sad. It's been such a good conversation, and thank you everyone for joining and the panelists. I know we could probably keep talking about this for hours, so I'm sure if you have follow-up questions, like definitely feel free to shoot them my way. Jenna at quala.io would love to keep this conversation going. We're going to send a follow-up with this recording, as well as some of the key takeaways if from this session if you miss it or want to share it with colleagues. Lastly, I do want to make a note and a little plug about Quala. This community is hosted by Quala, and again, we are a single workplace for customer-facing teams that really unsilos these insights that we're talking about, and helping teams capture both qualitative and quantitative data from both your people, products, and more. So if you're curious to learn more, I would love to chat, or if you have feedback from the session, please email me, Jenna at quala.io. I would love to chat. Good luck everyone closing out Q3. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was so much fun.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Jenna.
much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job, Jenna.
Thank you.
Great job, panelists.
Great to see
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
See you all soon.
Bye.
Have a good day and week.
You too.